My entire childhood I saw a shadow person in the corners of my eyes. Now I think it's coming back. I was a kid when I first began seeing it. It was early autumn, the beginning of the school year for the 3rd or 4th grade. I can't remember exactly. In the year prior, I had befriended a neighbor of mine who lived just 3 houses down the road, August Green. He was a bit of a strange kid, antisocial and self-centered. I was the only person he ever enjoyed the company of, and I'm still not sure why. I didn't do anything different than anyone else. Maybe it was simply because I was antisocial as well. We both felt like outcasts in our small elementary class, so we naturally drifted together. I remember when we were taking our 3rd grade class photo. Due to how the students were arranged, August ended up in the stand directly behind me, as I had to kneel in the front due to having the curse of an end-of-alphabet last name. Being a reserved and timorous kid, I had a strange aversion to smiling in photos. But for this class photo, August found it funny to whisper certain phrases we both found hilarious as he stood behind me in an attempt to make me finally smile in a class photo. I remember the flash going off as I cracked up to August's muttering of the pin gas line from the YouTube video we both saw as the peak of comedy at the time. When the photos arrived in the mail a few weeks later, my mother remarked with a smile how it was nice to finally have a picture where I looked happy. August had an older brother, Orion. Even as a kid, I thought they were unique names, especially for our little town. Most people there went under the guideline that a baby name had to appear as a name in the Bible. The Greens' parents were likely hippie folk, with more New Age and naturalist beliefs as opposed to the conservative social values I was surrounded by. I wouldn't know, though. I never met their parents. I did meet Orion, though, as soon after August and I connected. Orion became friends with my own older brother, Simon. Orion was even stranger than his brother, and even more self-centered. Maybe it was because of how they were raised. From what August told me, it seemed their mother pampered them, always supplying them with the treats and goodies that they wished for. And so, as the Greens began frequenting my family's home more and more, they expected more and more to be given. They thought it was strange that my parents wouldn't supply them with snacks when they came over, or that I wasn't allowed to play video games right after school, instead having to wait until my homework was finished. Before long, my parents began to tire of our friends' entitlement, and so they instructed us to stop inviting them over. This was fine, as I preferred spending my time with friends outside exploring anyways. I was glad to have an excuse to tell August we couldn't go inside and play Mario Kart every day. Strangely, even after this, August never invited me into his home. I guess I never really thought about that back then. Anyways, the first sort of encounter happened in those earlier days. The autumn where August and Orion were still allowed to come over. My siblings and I had just gotten home from school. I was tired. Those first few days of school always seemed to drain my energy faster, and so I said my farewells to August outside my home, promising he could come over the next day. Simon, however, invited Orion over for a while. I went inside, eating my small after-school snack, and then made my way to the living room to watch the last moments of daytime TV with my mother. I wouldn't admit it then, but I actually loved watching those talk shows and reality dramas that would play all day in the early 2010s before the evening and nighttime programming began. I was sitting there for a half hour or so when my brother came inside from playing with Orion in the yard. He told us Orion had gone home for dinner and made his way to his room. Around a half hour later, I began seeing movement outside the front window. A human shape crossing the window every couple of minutes, right up against the side of the house where the walkway from the driveway was. I remarked to my mom how it was strange that Orion was still there in our yard even after Simon had come inside, and she just muttered in response, her eyes still glued to the TV. I told her I was going outside, which she once again barely gave any indication of comprehension to, and I stepped out the front door into the cool air of a sunsetting September evening. Nobody was there. I checked the front yard and backyard, expecting to find Orion pacing around stuck in his own thoughts as he often did, but there was nobody. I asked Simon again later that night, and he insisted Orion went home when he said so, even claiming to have watched Orion walk all the way back to his house 3 lots away. I wasn't convinced, though, and assumed our unusual neighbor had partaken in his usual peculiar activities. As I said, it was common for me to see him pacing around for upwards of half an hour just thinking to himself. I saw it at school, I saw it when he was at our house, I even saw it in the Greens' backyard sometimes when I passed by on a solitary walk. I rationalized it as Orion doing his usual, and I continued on believing that, until I saw the figure again. I was taking the trash out sometime that same fall. I don't remember if it was weeks later or merely days. Hell, it could have been the same night. It's all foggy. What I do remember was that I saw the figure once again. Unless it was trash day, our trash cans stood halfway up our driveway, alongside the house. The driveway then continued back another 50 or 60 feet to the garage, which sat against the back of our backyard, its rear wall marking the property line. That's where I saw it. In the liminal blue hour of mid-autumn in Minnesota, where the indigo landscape contrasted with the yellow-orange leaves, creating a beautiful sight that echoed the color palette of a Van Gogh painting and evoked you with a strange nostalgic feeling. The time of day that made you self-reflect on your year and realize, finally, that winter was approaching. The year was nearing its end. The evenings spent outside amongst bonfires and orange-hued streetlights were waning, and you'd be spending your nights inside until the spring. It was here that I saw a dark, humanoid figure standing beside our garage. It seemed to be watching me, though I couldn't make out any of its features, so I couldn't be sure of which direction it was truly facing. I was scared, but not as scared as you'd imagine yourself to be in such a situation. I didn't go running inside crying to my parents about a strange man in our backyard. I just walked back inside and sat back down at the dinner table, saying nothing. Maybe it respected me for that. Maybe it grew comfortable showing itself to me after it realized I wasn't afraid. I don't know for sure. What I do know is that I began seeing it more after that. On the walk to school on those dewy, cold October mornings, I would see a figure off in the distance standing in the yard of someone's home, barely visible through the omnipresent fog that always accompanied those chilly mornings. At recess, I would see it on the treeline on the edge of the school grounds as I played with August on the playground. By the winter, I was even seeing it inside. At school, darting through the hallway in the corner of my vision. At home, standing in the bathroom shower as someone opened the door, disappearing once they flipped the light switch on. Nobody else saw it, at least they never said anything. Then again, neither did I. That summer, August began living the dream of every kid in the early 2010s. His family got a trampoline. I was still yet to be invited inside his home, but he would invite me over to play on the trampoline in his backyard all the time. We spent most of our afternoons there, inventing new games or just talking as we bounced absent-mindedly. It was an evening just like that, at the end of that summer, that I saw the figure once again. It stood in the backyard of one of August's neighbors, beyond the chain-link fence and amongst the thick-trunked pine trees that dotted their yard. I paid it no mind, as I had grown used to seeing it. Something was different this time, however, as August stopped his jumping and sat down, gazing towards the pines. "Do you see that?" August asked me in a too calm voice with a too calm expression. "See what?" I continued bouncing, staring up at the trees above. "That guy over there," my friend answered, gesturing towards the figure. "Yeah," I responded. "Okay, cool," August said before going back to bouncing. A few moments of silence followed before August broke them once again. "I see it a lot." "Me too," I responded. "What is it?" "I don't know," August answered, and we continued bouncing. I still don't know why it was so casual for us. I guess that's just how things are when you're a kid. We had no reason to be afraid of this thing. Neither of us had any experiences similar. We didn't watch horror movies or true crime TV shows, We didn't know of all the evil that the world had to offer, paranormal or not. To us, this was just another thing we saw throughout our day. It was no different from the squirrels that darted across the street as you walked by, or the dragonflies that always seemed to slam into the side of your face in the summertime. It was just something that was there. Time continued to pass, as it tends to do, and pretty soon it was autumn yet again. Those chilly blue evenings returned, and we developed a new schedule to correspond with the school year's return. After school, I would go home and do my homework. Afterwards, I would eat dinner with my family and then head over to August's backyard to hang out on the trampoline until the sun finished setting. Once the streetlights were on, I would return home. It was on those short walks home that I would see it the most. It was also then that I began to fear the figure more. Perhaps I was gaining enough life experience to realize how strange its presence was. Or perhaps the conversation with August made me realize definitively that the figure was real and not a figment of my imagination. Either way, I began developing some anxious quirks that stuck with me to my teenage years. As I walked, I would turn my head around every couple of steps to check behind me to ensure I wasn't being followed. Those autumn nights, though, anytime I glanced back I would see it, peeking out from the side of someone's house or standing beside a tree in someone's yard. Once, I saw it standing beside an overhanging lamppost, the sole one on our street. That scene is still burned in my mind like a photograph, as it unnerved me more than anything else ever had. The figure stood directly below the light, yet it was still entirely concealed in shadow. A black shape that was recognizably human and yet bore no decipherable features. It wasn't masculine or feminine, it wasn't naked or clothed. It just was. I don't know if it sensed how I had grown uncomfortable with it or if it was merely coincidence. But after that fall I began seeing it less and less. By the start of our 5th grade, I didn't see it at all. August still saw it, though. In fact, it seemed the less I saw of it, the more he did. He would tell me about it, too. I remember one spring day specifically. We sat on the swings swaying back and forth as the other kids played. It wasn't often we got to spend recess on the swings, as it was a class of around 30 students and there were only 4 swings. We got lucky that day, though, as a large group of most of the class had decided to play a game of Lava Monster on the playground equipment, leaving the swings free. It talked to me last night, August said as he swung slowly, breaking a silence that I hadn't really realized was there. What did? I asked, confused by his wording. The shadow man, August mumbled. He was outside my room. He told me I should come with him. Come with him where? Postured. I don't know, but I told him no. I'm fine here, August explained, his eyes drawn to the woodchips below. Maybe you should tell your parents, I said, giving the only piece of advice any 4th grader ever had to offer. No, he said sharply, before continuing in a softer tone. It said not to. They would get mad at me. Oh, I responded. Okay. I guess I assumed at the time that it was just August's active imagination. It wasn't the first time he had come to me with some imaginary sequence of events he had insisted actually happened. He had spent the previous summer trying to convince me Bigfoot lived in the woods near our houses and would come out to eat lunch with him whenever I wasn't there. That was the last time August spoke to me about the figure. Before long, it was just a weird, unexplainable presence from my childhood years. I didn't see it anymore, and August didn't talk about it anymore. 5th grade was the final year of elementary school. Upon its completion, August and I would be middle schoolers. We would no longer walk the 3 blocks to school every day. Instead, we'd take the bus. We wouldn't have recess or cubbies. We'd have passing time in lockers. We'd have class schedules where we'd have to find our way around the school, slowly finding the optimal path between each of our classes. We'd be independent. I think that transition, or at least the looming presence of its arrival, really changes you. You begin to have the realization that your childhood, your true childhood, is over. You realize you need to grow independence, you need to find out who you are. I think it was because of this that August and I grew apart that year. I began making more friends within our class throughout 5th grade. Daniel, a very religious kid who made me recite prayers with him before school, and Avery, the first girl I ever really talked to, outside of my family, of course. I started to spend more time with them, playing their games at recess or sitting with them at lunch. August and I had bonded as the outcasts, the kids who had nobody else to talk to at recess, the kids who were never picked when the class was self-separated for group activities, so I think he resented that I had found other friends when he hadn't. Those days that I spent with Avery and Daniel, he just spent alone. I think that made him angry. He didn't take it out on me, though. He took it out on my friends. I wasn't there when it happened. I only saw the recess monitors escort Daniel inside to the nurse's office. I rushed to find Avery amongst the crowd of gawking kids on the edge of the playground who stared at this child being taken across the blacktop like adults stare at the wreckage of a car crash as they drive by. I soon found Avery, asking her what happened, and with ire in her eyes she explained to me how August had wordlessly approached her and Daniel beside the tunnel slide and tackled Daniel, biting him in the arm hard enough to draw blood. I distanced myself from August after that. I had already stopped coming over to play with him on his trampoline under some 5th grade notion that such an activity was too immature for 11-year-olds. After that moment, though, I stopped talking to him entirely. In the final months of our 5th grade year, I only saw him from afar, pacing around the playground at recess on his own and muttering to himself, lost in his own thoughts. Across the classroom in the morning, in the corner seat as far from mine as possible, doodling irritably as the other kids socialized. It was crushing, watching my years-long friendship dissipate in moments. Knowing that the middle school experience we spent so much time planning, where we'd find the midpoint of each of our between-class routes so we could catch up every day between periods, or spend our lunches battling Pokemon cards and playing DS, something that was forbidden in elementary school but welcome in the middle grades, would never come to fruition. I wasn't too sad, however. I had new friends, much more positive and diverse friends, with different interests and topics of conversation. I didn't need a bizarre loner who bit people in my life. So when the 6th grade began that following autumn, I didn't look for August in each of my classes, or between them for that matter. I didn't find his homeroom or his locker. What's strange about this all now is that, not only did I not go out of my way to find August, I didn't see him at all. We lived down the street from each other, and yet I never saw him at the bus stop or on the bus. That's explainable. Maybe his parents, in line with their pampering ways, drove him to school every day. That still didn't explain why I didn't ever see him in the hallways between classes, not a single time within the 3 years of middle school or the 4 following years of high school. I never got assigned a class with him. I never saw him across the lunchroom. Nothing. I rationalized this initially by assuming his parents sent him to a different school, perhaps another nearby district or private school. There were plenty to choose from, as this was the Twin Cities suburbs. There were 5 or 6 districts within a half-hour drive, and that would make sense after the biting incident. His parents realistically could have decided he needed a fresh start in middle school after the challenges of 5th grade. The curious part is that I never saw him near his house again either. His family didn't move, as the car that had been parked there for my entire childhood remained there until being replaced with a similar, newer model in my high school years. The trampoline stayed there, albeit empty, the entire time I lived down the street. I just never saw August again, or Orion for that matter. All of this is only slightly perturbing at best, I know, but all of these memories suddenly returned to me recently. They had never left, of course, I just hadn't thought about them in a while. Upon recalling my childhood spent alongside August, I was curious enough to go back to my parents' home for a brief visit, whereupon I dug through the basement storage in search of my elementary school yearbooks. I found all 5 and began scanning through them, purely interested in seeing my childhood friend's face again after so many years. I was excited to have a real photo of him to remember, to make those moments in my memory more accurate. To my surprise, however, he wasn't there. I checked all 5 yearbooks. There was never an August Green in my class. There was never an August Green in my school. Frantically, I flipped through my 3rd grade yearbook to the class pictures section, skimming through the pages until I saw Mrs. Benson's 3rd grade class. There I was, kneeling in the front row, frowning like usual. I returned upstairs, puzzled, and questioned my parents. As my mother sat, her eyes glued to her TikTok feed, she confirmed the words I somehow knew, yet dreaded, I would hear. According to my mother, there never was an August Green who lived down the street. There was no Orion, who would pace around as he muttered to himself. We had no friends who were barred from coming over due to an over-entitled mindset. According to my mother, the Greens never had kids. According to my mother, I was a lonely child who didn't make any friends until I finally let Avery and Daniel get close to me in the 5th grade. What about the car? The trampoline? I stammered. What? My mom asked, finally looking up from her phone. I could tell she was confused. Real confusion. She had no idea why I was so upset about our neighbors being childless, and so insistent that they had kids. Their car. It's a full-sized SUV. A family car. I shouted. I don't know. Maybe they haul stuff around a lot. My mom offered as an explanation. Why do they have a trampoline? I asked. Maybe they have nieces or nephews. I don't know. What's gotten into you? Why are you so upset? She shouted back. I stormed out, confused and upset. I got into my car, slammed the door, and quickly called my brother, who said exactly what I expected, and yet couldn't believe at the same time. He never knew an Orion. Those neighbors had no kids. I still don't know what to believe. Maybe I'm insane, maybe I have a brain tumor or a carbon monoxide leak. I don't know. All I know is that my memories are real. My childhood cannot be a lie. This has shattered my mind, destroyed my entire worldview, and taken the possibility of sleep away from me for weeks at least. I have no idea what happened, but I know I have to hold it together. I have a kid now, you see. I'm married and have a beautiful young daughter named Lydia. Watching her learn to walk and speak these last few years has been the highlight of my life, and that's why I'm so terrified. You see, I took Lydia to the park today, both in an attempt to clear my mind and because her life shouldn't stop just because mine does. When it was time to go back home, she waved off towards the treeline outside the playground. I asked her, casually, who she was waving at, expecting a response like saying bye-bye to the park or my imaginary friend. Her true response chilled me to my core. The way she said it so casually, as a toddler does. The Shadow Man, she yelled in that excited toddler way. He followed us all the way here from our house.